Hello, and welcome to Thinking Out Loud. I'm your co-host, Nathan Rittenhouse.
And I'm your co-host, Cameron McAllister. We talk about free speech in this episode. Yeah, we go there. It's a charged topic. This will be helpful to you, not only as you think about free speech and the way politics is unfolding and has been unfolding in the United States for a long time, but also as you think about speech in Christian terms. Not talking about in terms of the Constitution, but how do we practice our speech as God's people? Like, share, and subscribe. And if you want to support the work that we're doing, you can do that by going to www.toltogether.com.
We're big fans of free speech. We'll put the bottom line up front there. We'll talk about that as political and practical theory and then bring some theological reflections into this conversation. Obviously, hot button issue in the news these days, and lots of interesting commentary coming from a lot of different directions. And so, I don't know where to start. Obviously,
Yeah.
you have the killing of Charlie Kirk. People say, that's a direct assault on free speech. Now you have political movements back in the other direction that are putting significant pressure on individuals, corporations, and organizations and the types of speech that their employees or associates are using. And there are problems in both categories here, in both the directions that hopefully we will get to. But rather than just, the sky is falling, maybe we can parse out some of the complexity of the issue and give ourselves some Christian thinking points here as we listen to the conversations that are going on and then think about the way in which we want to, as faithful citizens of whatever country you're listening to this in, live and use our words well. Cameron, which angle do you want to,
Well, yeah.
how do you want to jump in here?
2 points of entry. Let's talk about the cancellation of Jimmy Kimmel first, because I think that brought this to a kind of head. So Jimmy
Mhm.
Kimmel makes some remarks on his show. You're free to look them up and check them out. I'm not going to repeat them here. They're not because they're so obscene or anything like that, but I think they might be a bit of a distraction. Just look them up. You can see what he said. So some critical remarks, and then he pressure was put on him so there's the Federal Communications Commission, the FCC, and President Donald Trump also basically put pressure on the network that carried his show, financial pressure, and he was suspended indefinitely for these remarks. So that is causing there's one piece, Nathan. That's
Okay,
causing a
there's one.
whole lot of yeah, so there's one obviously major concern there. People talking about political satire as being a major tradition within societies of where free speech is carried out, and that this sets a kind of dark precedent for people being muzzled on certain topics. Because President Trump, of course, who
Let's not
is
make this vague.
never
I
quiet
think
about
this sets an interesting precedent. Let's I'll put my name, I'll
yes,
put my head on the line here. Like, particularly, okay, so there have been a lot of issues and a lot of people saying heinous and ridiculous and incitements of violence and all kinds of stuff. And I can also see the people who say, look, if you're in a position of trusted authority within our culture and you say things that are factually untrue or incite violence, that's a problem. And that is different, I think, than what Jimmy Kimmel did. First of all, I
hmm
put zero stock in Jimmy Kimmel saying anything that I think remotely has anything to do with any part of reality. It's a late night comedy thing. I can't remember the last time that I heard of something that Jimmy Kimmel said or did that I even thought was funny, much less important, much less shaped the cultural narrative around what's going on. And he didn't say anything that incited violence. And so there's a little bit of the squashing of that, like, are we claiming that Jimmy Kimmel was a culturally influential force that was a trusted media figure? Like, I'm insulted that the critique gives him the dignity of the thing that the critique was like. And do I need the federal government to sort this out for me? Like, please give me the dignity of being able to look at something and being able to say that's dumb
yeah.
on my own. Like, I don't need Big Brother holding my hand to not to be able to. So I'm okay. Tone it down. Move on.
You're
Interrupted you.
offended that we're giving Jimmy Kimmel this much credit
Exactly.
as a
That's
nation.
exactly what's happening. Yeah.
I hear you. But then, of course, President Trump goes on his social network. What is it? The True
Truth.
Social
Yeah.
Network? I can
Truth.
never. Truth. Sorry.
Yeah, Truth
Get with the
Social.
times,
Yeah.
Cameron. Truth Social Network, and calls for the cancellation of Jimmy Fallon and others. So,
Well,
you know,
this is preceded
saying,
by
"Hey, give us more." Mhm.
JD Vance being on Charlie Kirk's show, hosting it, and saying, "Look, if you find people who are engaged in these types of behavior, you need to call up their employers and out them and go after them."
Yep.
Two things. One is I understand the emotional response. And I also understand that conservatives felt like more liberal or left perspective has been doing this for a while. And I've read enough history to know that when a political leader starts calling for other members of a citizenship to tattletale on citizens to their employer or local government representative groups, that is a massive red flag, period. Just like all
Yeah.
across history. So all three, I want to put all three of those things on the table as you zip by that one. This is
No, so
thinking out loud, where
that brings
Cameron
us
says
to,
helpful things and Nathan interrupts him.
well, I mean, this is us also just walking through this together and thinking about it out loud as we go. Again, in the hopes of offering some constructive reflection here, but we are very much kind of present tense thinking about this as well. But
We think out loud. I mean, speech is kind of what we do
that's what we
for
do.
this hour of our week.
Okay, but the other piece though is, so there's the Jimmy Kimmel cancellation and what that represents and the precedent that it's setting. But then there is the fact that now the shoe is on the other foot. I've had several friends come to me and just express frustration, and I totally get this about, hey, wasn't it for a while conservatives who were complaining about censorship, and remember COVID-19 where certain articles that departed from the script on the virus were either being removed or being labeled as misinformation.
They
This was,
didn't
and
comport with the
people were
administration's policies.
people were screaming censorship. But now the same, you're seeing a number of conservatives using this again. This is something we say over and over again, Nathan. Politically speaking, and we're not the only ones saying this at all. Patrick Deneen says this in many of his publications. He says it in Why Liberalism Failed. We may be very politically polarized. Okay, we may be very, very divided. Yes, but we're all using the same playbook. We're actually we're walking in more of a lockstep than it would initially seem, because we're all using the same tactics here.
Well, hang on.
And so now you're just seeing that, yeah, let's.
So yes, but I wonder if isn't why this issue is interesting to me, Cameron. Is that did we do a podcast on James Lindsay's concept of the woke right? Have we talked about the woke right on record, or is that
Yes,
just
we have.
conversation?
No,
So
we
now,
have. It's been a
if
little
you
while.
yeah, if you go and listen to something like just I don't know, last day or two, James Lindsay was on Unheard, and the interview begins with him saying to James Lindsay, "So, do you feel vindicated now? Do you feel validated about there being a woke right?" And this like whole
Mhm.
grievance and using political pressure to suppress the grievance that you see against your political. And Lindsay's like, well, yeah, like, I mean, I've seen this playing out. I think on the free speech issue, Cameron, think about like the ACLU, very, very, very left, once
Sure.
sued
Yep.
for the right of legit Nazis to march through a town.
Mhm.
And it was hate and violence. And they're like, yeah, but it's free speech and we can't lose that. The First Amendment, for all of you constitutional conservatives out there, this is a massive foundation of the fluidity and the functionality of the concept of the nation that we live in. This is the one principle where historic liberals and historic conservatives have agreed deeply. And so I think what we're seeing emerge here is a left and a right that are both, like you said, using the same tools and plays, but are disconnected from actual conservatism
Mhm.
in a classically centralist constitutional framework of thinking about representative democracy and a republic. And that's where so I do see a lot of conservatives of the traditional like National Review conservatives being like, whoa, wait a second, hang on,
Yeah.
not cool. Um, and so I just want to point out that that's why this moment feels different, I think, because this is one in which maybe perhaps the the more vocal right now is so clearly mirroring the vocal left in its tactics, and there being a middle group saying like, "Whoa, hang on, just because the other side was wrong in doing it doesn't mean we're right in doing it." And that is a big principle that I don't see a lot of people um, finding platforms and voices to speak from.
All right. Let's just name some uncomfortable truths. So, you talked about something like classic conservatism, or even not even have to be classic conservatism. Those who defend free speech passionately would be just people who defend the American democratic experiment, classic liberalism, right? And they would
Yeah.
be right and left
Well,
would be ideally
can we say that
united on that.
classical liberalism is conservative? Like you're conserving a set of virtues
Yes.
and principles by so don't when we say conservative and liberal here and classical, don't think
Yeah.
left and right as a modern
Right.
political
Exactly.
construct. Just make sure you got that in your mind. We're using these terms academically.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyway,
But therein, right there, lies the rub, because that is not an accurate description of life in America right now, and hasn't been for a long time. So it's possible to offer a very eloquent and very sound philosophical defense of free speech and the protection of free speech. And we've done some of that on the show before. We've talked about how it's important for people to give voice to ideas, even that we would view as some of which we would view to be, pernicious and harmful. But so it's possible to do that. But for a long time, though, in the United States, we've talked about this in the last episode. Practically speaking, politics now is seen as a zero sum game. It is
yeah,
not
sure.
about any kind of a philosophical defense. It is not about making a sound case. It is about winning. And it's been this way for a long time. So the practical outworking of that is by any means necessary, if we can get those results, let's do it.
Oh, okay.
And so if it so yeah, hold on one second and then I want to kick it over to you, Nathan. So the grievance playbook has been shown to be highly effective in the past. And the line between persuasion and manipulation begins to get thinner and thinner and thinner. And so that's what everybody is doing. This is another, by the way, this is where it does get quite sobering. This is another outworking of what I would call cultural nihilism, because this isn't committed to any kind of deeper, there is no deeper meaningful commitment here. There is no higher principle other than might makes right in a certain sense. And so if we can put financial pressure on a television network, if it will get us the result we want to get whoever off the air, then do it, because we're calling the shots and we get to say how things are. We get to basically name reality in a sense.
So you beat me to it a little bit here, but I'm just thinking out loud here is that the scary thing is when might makes right is no longer a principle but becomes the primary narrative. So what I
Yep.
mean by that is I think, or I like to think, maybe I don't know. I was born in 1986. Like I've missed a lot of world history. But I talk to older people, um, and that's and it seems to me like speaking to like my grandparents' generation, there was a time in which you had kind of a vision of where we're going as a country and an argument about the best way to get there. So I live at a place where, depending on where you're coming from, it's not immediately clear what the best way to get here is. And so I often give people feedback of like, okay,
That's very true.
here's some options of the best way to get to my house. Um, all of them have the same idea, like we're going to the same destination. What's the best way to get there? And I listened to my
Mm.
grandparents' generation even speak politically about like, well, when I was a kid, my sister thought, voted for this person and my parents voted for this person. We'd have these rousing conversations around the dinner table of like, here's what's good for the good of the nation and here's the best avenue to get there. So it was there was a story with a destination, and the argument was, how do we get there? Now, then there was
Mm.
an intermediate period in which there was an argument about the actual destination. So it was no longer how do we get to the same place. It's like here are two visions for what the good life is. And then we choose
Mhm.
political parties that'll manifest those definitions of the good life. Now, here's phase three. This is not academic. This is just Nathan anecdotally making stuff up. You can listen to like Ross Douthat interviewing Ezra Klein on the Interesting Times, New York Times podcast. Douthat being the conservative interviewing Klein, and he's saying to Ezra Klein, like, "Hey, you know, the left's problem is it actually has no narrative right now. Like, what is your story? What is your vision of success? There isn't a." And he's like, "I'm not sure the right is doing a great job of that either." But he's like, "There still is a little bit of a sense of like there's a cosmic reality and goal and vision here. Maybe, you know, get married, buy a house, have some kids, and then look for ways that politics and the economy support that. But politics and the economy aren't the main thing." And so they're
Mm.
discussing the
Yeah.
loss of a narrative of what is it that we're even trying to do. And in recent times, I mean, think through, we've now come through like most of my adult life, the presidential political cycle has been people being elected because of who they're not. So it's not the virtue of the candidate, it's because they're not the other candidate that people dislike more. And so when you
Yeah.
live in a context in which the goal of a political party is to combat the other political party, not pursue a well-defined vision, that's where things get really messy.
Yeah, I don't
Am I being
the
too
idea
pessimistic on that? Maybe you should critique my analysis there first.
no. Well, I don't think you're being too pessimistic. I think we have a political scene that has become increasingly cynical and has become that kind of that vicious game that we talked about. And these are the outworkings. I want to get a little bit more personal right now though, and I want to pose the question, why is it among certain, let's just say a segment of, let's say evangelicals, let's say, you know, a large section of evangelicals and theologically conservative Christians, why is it so hard to express reservations about Charlie Kirk? This is something that I've seen,
Oh, because it's all or
and I've
nothing.
had a few.
Nobody
So
inhabits
that's
two
where,
space
because
parts of two spaces. We are now all have to be conformed to the image of this world, man. Pick a side.
right, because I've seen a few people who have, I'm condensing. This is a sort of, this is a condensed version of many different responses I've encountered personally and I've seen on social media from several people. But basically, it's an argument that goes something like this, and I'll do my best to steel man it, even though it's very obvious I completely disagree with it, but I'll do my best here. And it's something like this. It's, look, if if you are expressing if you're offering some kind of critique about Charlie Kirk, and if you are in any way qualifying statements about him, such as, well, it's very, very sad that we lost this man and he was very courageous. But if you have that in there, he expressed some views that I think are problematic, that they depart from the ethos and the commandments of Jesus. If you have any kind of clause in there, then you need to search your heart. You need to basically, it disqualifies the remarks you've just made. Any kind of compassion that you've offered is thereby undermined. And I know I didn't express that well, and I'm trying my best, but this is an argument I've seen over and over again, and it's so obviously false. So it's hard for me to even give it a credible kind of expression. I'm doing my best,
So
but
let me try something that help.
that's something we should talk about. Yeah.
Yeah, there was a actually a I was thinking this, like I had this thought in my head, and then I saw a Wall Street Journal article that said they, so imagine they in quotation marks, they didn't kill Charlie Kirk. Okay,
Mhm.
bold
Mhm.
statement, right? The left did this, the
Sure.
anti-fascist. Okay, well, being anti-fascist is not a bad idea. Obviously, being misguided about who a fascist actually is a bad idea. But the sense here, Cameron, is that people are not near like real humans are not nearly as clearly defined as their online personas are.
Mhm.
The digital representations of ourselves are a very shallow, like, where is the core of an ideology, or where's the core of an idea, or where's the core of a person and their actual ideas. And so if you have a Venn diagram where they don't overlap, it's just two circles. We live in a world that sees two circles that don't overlap, and that's not that is digitally the real world. It is not actually the real world that we live in. And I think
Mhm.
there were a lot of people on a more Democrat leaning side who did say and were brought to serious grief and said, I agreed with a lot of Charlie's policies, but he was doing this the right way. We respected him for what he's doing. This is an absolute tragedy. What in the world is wrong with the world? So you hear somebody say something like that, next channel over, every single Democrat wants to kill Christian. Like, what? That's that's not
Mhm.
reality.
Mhm.
Um,
No.
and so it's this digital totalizing and bifurcation that doesn't that's where I like that's why I feel, because I'm part of a church. I know lots of people. I'm part of a neighborhood and a community and a public school system, and I know a lot of people with diverse political, religious, and philosophical views. And you know what? They aren't like the real world isn't
Right.
like that. That's but it gets but to your question, it gets scary to me when I hear Christians participating in that, because I suddenly start to question whether or not they're actually functionally engaging with reality.
Yes, and whether they're being pulled in insidious ways to playing this vicious game. So the idea that so if I say I admired a lot of what Charlie Kirk did, I admired his courage, his boldness, his conviction. And let me give a specific example. One video I came across, Nathan, that just really did blow me away was Charlie. I talked about how Charlie Kirk would go into multitudes of lions' dens,
Mhm.
just people who completely not only disagreed with him, but saw him with lip curling disgust. That in and of itself isn't easy, but did you have you seen any of the footage of him on the Whatever podcast
No.
with a bunch of these it's wild. So he's surrounded by all of these women who have OnlyFans
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah,
accounts
yeah. I know what
and
that is, yeah. The OnlyFans, yeah.
yeah, who are very proud of it, think it's great, think it's
I should
empowering for them as
clarify, I
women.
don't know what OnlyFans is. Like, of course, I know what the conversation you're talking about with Charlie Kirk and the OnlyFans people is.
Good qualification
Yeah,
there.
just let's get that in there.
But yes, but he's on this podcast surrounded by all of these women who feel empowered by, you know, showing
Digital
themselves naked
prostitution.
in front of the camera and precisely. And so and these are things that he says to them. And so he has the boldness and the audacity to stand up for the fact that he is a husband and has a family and he stands up for monogamy. He also asks them very difficult questions. Well, do you really think that any man, given your line of work, will respect you? Well, men, there's one very interesting exchange where he gets this one girl basically says, "Oh yeah, all men are liars, men lie." He's like, "I completely agree with you. Men are liars, and men are really good liars." And then later on, he asks, "Well, given what you're doing, how could you ever? Do you think men will ever respect you?" "Oh well, men have told me that they respect me." Yeah, but you just said that men are liars, and so he has this really and I just thought to myself, there's no way I would go on a podcast like that and and I mean, say these kinds of things to the faces of these people. I mean, and yet he does it and he doesn't really he and again, his trademark boldness, but also his civility are on vivid display there.
Mhm.
It's really great. And by the way, the Whatever podcast issued a very heartfelt statement after he died, basically saying something to the effect of, "We're so sad to see our friend Charlie Kirk has been murdered. We loved our time with him." And I mean, it really was. I mean, there have been a couple, by the way, on the left who have said some very heartfelt things. Bill Maher, also, by the way, I
Mhm.
don't know
Yeah,
if
good
you've come
example
across
there, yeah. Mhm.
his comments there. So yeah, basically, I like the guy. He was very very sad about everything that's happened. So I can say that I hope I've I've showed that there is a lot I admire about Charlie Kirk,
Way to work
but
it there, Cameron. You really showed us your
yeah, there we go.
you really led up to the but.
There's my bona fides.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, I do have a serious problem with some other statements that he's made, and I do think but I also think he was a human being, Nathan. To what you were saying earlier, he's not a persona. He was a human, and he was a
And he was 31.
31-year-old
He
human.
didn't have all of his
He
ideas
was br
locked in for the next 40
no,
years.
exactly. I'm so grateful I didn't have a huge platform when I was 31 years old. I mean, the things I would have said. So and was saying, I just didn't have a microphone in front of me, thank God. So, I saying that is not if we're just from a human perspective, there's nothing controversial about that, except in certain circles. Now, no, Cameron, pick a side. Pick a side. Whose side are you on? That's that
Ah,
horrendous, vicious, nihilistic game, and I steadfastly refuse to be pulled into that. And you ought to as well if you follow Jesus.
who said this? That what is underneath this is there's a battle between good and evil. This is almost Lukian off in height, but it's not. I was saying it's a battle between
Yeah,
good and evil,
sure.
and now we have mapped the battle between good and evil onto left and right, and both sides do this. And
Mhm.
when you
Yep,
start to say
absolutely.
that the dividing line between good and evil falls along political lines, you're being
Oh my
extremely
goodness.
naive to think that your side is not also capable of evil.
I
That's
always
and so this is where Christians have like when I go back to that cosmic vision thing, we have to have a bigger, better cosmic vision than being sucked into these s- styles of conceptualizing humanity or history. Like this is not like, oh, we're speculating here. No, history shows us exactly, and I'm not like, oh, the sky is falling. We're all going to turn into a French Revolution next year. I don't think some civil war is imminent, like that kind of thing. But at the
sure.
same time, we do want to like the easiest time to pluck a weed is when it's 2 inches tall, not when it's 2 feet tall. Like there are things that are worth plucking before they develop roots. Um, and you don't have to be thinking about this. We haven't even started to think about speech from a Christian perspective yet. But just historically, we should all be able to say Cameron and I are not defending. Well, Charlie Kirk himself said there's no such thing as hate speech. Like this is the interesting one that you have a lot of liberals throwing back at the right now when
Yeah,
Pam
sure.
Bondi, comes out and says we're going to pursue hate speech. Like Charlie Kirk didn't believe hate speech was a real thing. Um, so a little bit of consistency would be great.
Absolutely. Yeah. I will give you this though for the good versus evil. It's very simple.
Oh yeah,
It's got tremendous appeal in that sense because yeah, here you have a very simple way to categorize. Here's the good side and here's the evil side. And I'm on the good team. So therefore what I do is justified. And also, I mean as Jonathan Haidt pointed out with Greg Lukianoff in The Coddling of the American Mind, the reason this might, one of the things that it does is it can empower ends justifying the means logic. Well, it's not just that I'm fighting against people who are ignorant or who I believe to be misguided. I think they're evil. So we're going to do whatever it takes to shut this down. The time for passivity is over. And you hear this language all the time. But Nathan, I'm going to ask a question that you pose sometimes when we talk about these political games. How will we as Christians feel when the shoe is on the other foot? We can look to a nation like Canada right now, and we can look at the way hate speech laws are being used
Britain.
against pastors. Yeah, in Britain, yeah, who are if they're preaching from certain passages in the Bible that would condemn certain types of sexual behavior, for instance, if when that's labeled as hate speech and I mean, it's not completely widespread, but there are pastors who have, spent a couple of nights in prison for this. This is happening here in the West.
Yeah, so we don't want to put our head
So
in the sand and act like there is no threat to it.
right. And if we're opening up a precedent for these kinds of games with speech, that will bring about a set of very serious problems for the church as well.
Okay, here, let me my my thoughts on the value of speech go deeper than the First Amendment. So let's start there. Um, Speech is a good idea not because of the First Amendment. God spoke the world into being. Jesus is the revealed word. The prayer, yeah. So first of all, I think we need to recover a mass. Like we will have to give an account for every word that we speak.
Mm.
For me, that's a more challenging starting spot than whether or not the network that I'm speaking on would cancel me or what a political
Mhm.
theorist thinks. So the standard that we as Christians have for accuracy, for truth, for clarity, for tone, for gentleness and respect, all of that is much deeper and broader than the basic First Amendment. So let's appreciate the First Amendment, but let's recognize the First Amendment is not necessary in order for the proclamation of the gospel. Handy? Do I love living in a society that has that? Do I think historically and in political philosophy it is a linchpin of what it is that makes the situation we live in work? Yes. But let's see that as a anyway, my roots and my thoughts on this are much deeper. We can get into that later. That being said, um, get your wiffle ball bat ready. I'm going to toss one to you. Let's just, and as you're thinking
Oh
and
boy.
listening to this, think out loud with us. What would you say is the biblical justification, or what are the biblical grounds for the concept of free speech? It's
Yeah, you've
hard.
raised this one before.
It's
Yes.
well, or a whole number, or human rights would be another one. I mean,
Yes.
there is
Sure.
there's a pretty high level metaphysical way in which you can conceptualize the value of the individual that's independent of the beliefs that they hold, that comes from the concept of the Imago Dei, and it's there, but it also has a whole lot of Rousseau and Locke warped into it to get it
Sure.
to the modern version of what it is that we have. And you could say that they were subconsciously thinking in Christian Western. Okay, fine. Set all that aside. I was
But it's
as I
rather
was.
indirect.
It's
This
rather
whole
indirect.
this whole approach.
Thank you for
Yeah.
helping me with my speech there, Kim. I think back to the apostles. They're out preaching. They get arrested. They get hauled in, and they're like, "We're going to let you go. Just beat you first, but we're gonna. But we command you not to speak this name anymore." And you know what
Mm.
they didn't say? We have a constitutional right to free speech. They look at him and they say, what's better, to obey God or to obey
Mhm.
man? The vast majority of Christian proclamation has happened where protected speech is not a reality. And to speak the truth means that you suffer for speaking the truth, not in a political sense, but you could die. There are people in my genealogy who got their heads chopped off for preaching in the wrong language. Yeah, I have some thoughts about separation of church and state. Eh, So,
Yeah.
so first of all, um, let's contextualize the importance of this, relatively speaking, to say it is a phenomenal blessing if you have the capacity to live in a country where you have the freedom of speech. And I recognize that, like, 80% of you are listening to this as Americans, and it is enshrined in the Constitution of the country that you live in. And the Constitution did not come down on golden tablets from heaven. It's a wonderful approximation of a great experiment on how to organize a group of people. But we do have marching orders that are deeper and I think more comprehensive and engaging with the heart of humanity and the complexity of humanity, and give us a broader sense in which I have there is so much stuff, Cameron, that I have the legal right to say that I would never say as a Christian, because the boundaries and the principles of what it means to be made in the image of
You're
God,
held to a higher standard.
I'm held
Yeah.
to a higher standard. And so
Yeah.
I have the freedom to do a lot of stuff that I don't do as a Christian because it's antithetical to the broader vision of that I have of what it means to be a human. So certainly laughing at somebody else's death, not even close.
Out
And
of
so
bounds. Yeah.
same thing when,
Yeah.
somebody on the other side of the political aisle gets attacked. No giggling
Mhm.
at murder, guys, or harm. Like,
Mhm.
you don't that's not political theory, that's Christianity. And so there's a way in which this is really, really important for our country. There's another way in which it's really, really important for us as Christians. And so I think, to bring this all back around to how do we as Christians think about good, evil, the other, brokenness, what we laugh at, what we share, what we like. Um, People say there's a civilizational collapse happening. Do you know how the civilization was built? Out of people pursuing virtue and their individual choices. That is the conservative position, is that the moral choices that you make and the virtue of your character is the foundation and the stability of a nation. So
Yeah.
follow Jesus, and I think those things are a byproduct of that, but we're definitely getting the cart ahead of the horse. And if we're adopting certain principles, we're denying the existence of the cart and the horse altogether, and then you've just got mayhem.
Ultimately, Nathan, if we follow Jesus, we are his people first and foremost. And so that means with the inspiration of his Holy Spirit and the help of his people and his word, we are seasoning our speech as with salt. And
Oh, and that's not to
we
say, like, sit back on your heels. I mean, look, like, you thought
no.
Charlie Kirk was bold on whatever podcast. Let's take Jesus in the temple. I mean,
Hmm.
our paradigm here and our role model gives us some courage, but also shows that getting crucified for your free speech is, oh, yeah, that's normal
Well,
historically.
what are the motivations behind our speech as God's people? If we are pursuing Jesus's way, then the motivations behind all of our speech will be love. Even when our speech has to be firm and even when it has to be harsh, the motivations are love. The motivations will not be getting even. In fact, in as God's people, when you look at the actual way in which we live our lives, when you look to his teachings, there's really no room for getting even at all on the human side of things.
Hmm.
We're pursuing peace, but Jesus's peace and reconciliation. And that will put us at odds with our cultural moment. But as Nathan's pointed out so well, that always puts you at odds with any given
Hmm.
cultural moment. I mean, the big dividing line is always where your allegiances actually lie. And if your allegiances are to King Jesus and he is your one true king, it's going to present to you problems in any cultural moment. So it's just we said a long time ago, Nathan, that we need to be willing and ready to look weird, which is something kind of new for us in North America. And I think one of the ways in which I see a lot of resistance to just standing out as God's people, one of those modes of resistance is political. No, no, look, we want to get, and it can go like this. It is a civilizational moment. Things are falling apart. The center can't hold. Poor Yeats. Everybody quoting Yeats. Do you know that you're quoting Yeats when you say that? Mere anarchy is loose.
Be nice to a
But
swan.
everybody, right? All on and on we go. This is a civilizational moment. The time for sitting on our hands is over. We can't just hide in our prayer closets. We have to actually get out there and do something. We have to make things happen. And this is for the good of the nation. It's to protect people. Lives are at stake. So none of this changes the way of Jesus. None of this changes
Let me
who we are as people. The national vibe and mood don't change that. Now, they affect us, of course, but we need to be willing to be different, to stand out.
and here's the way I think we're different and we stand out, if I may, is that we have a tone to our disagreements that indicates that we actually care. Here's a story that summarizes. This is kind of funny. This was years ago. There was a local gathering, like ministerial association celebration of 50 years of, and so my grandpa was there, and this other preacher like they had preached at churches a couple miles apart for decades. And so this was all in good fun. What I'm about to say is not disparaging toward anybody. They were laughing at themselves and at each other, remembering like 50 years ago. And the guy said, "Oh, he's like, I was in this mode where I was preaching a lot of hellfire and brimstone." And he's like, and you know what? People were leaving my church and going to Dave Rittenhouse, the church that he's like, they would go hear Dave Rittenhouse preach. And he's like, well, wait a minute. He's like, I know that Dave Rittenhouse believes in hell also and preaches about it. So he's like, I got to figure out what's up. He's like, why would people leave my church and go listen because I'm doing this to go listen to somebody else preach the same thing? And so he's like, I got together and, they're both grinning and remembering this as they say it. And he's like, I tracked Dave down. I was like, Dave, why are people leaving? I'm preaching this thing and people are leaving and they're coming to your church. And you're preaching the same thing. He's like, what's the difference? And he said, Dave looked over me and he said, well, he said, maybe if you preached about hell in a tone that didn't make the congregation think you were hoping they went there, it would make a difference. And so
Yeah.
it's a funny story. And of course they're rolling in laughter thinking about
he had a Jonah to Nineveh tone, didn't he?
but do you see a parallel here?
Yeah.
Of
Oh,
can
of
we as
course,
Christians
absolutely.
have deep convictions about what's right, what's wrong, what's good, what's evil, what's helpful, what's chaotic, what's orderly, um, what is, and articulate that in such a way that the person that you disagree with actually thinks that you're saying truth to them because you care for them, not because you're trying to posture so that other people can neatly categorize you into the good, bad, ugly, or righteous category. And so, are we speaking
So,
for the good of the other or for our own clarity of our own labels so that other people can properly judge us and put us into the camps and then know whether or not we're friendlies or enemies? That's a task,
and
man.
it is a task. And one way to bring it home here would be to say, well, it's good to be praying for Charlie Kirk's family and friends. It's also good to be praying for, was it Tyler
Tyler
Robinson
Robinson's and his
and
family. And
and his family? Very good to be praying for them. He's not beyond the reach of Christ's redemptive love, and he's certainly deeply confused and lost, and he needs help. And there are so many. If you want to go down a very beautiful and radical path, you could just look at the stories of amazing forgiveness and reconciliation throughout the church's history of tribes people who have killed respective family members embracing, of people who have, been locked in long-standing hatred for years and years, and then through Jesus are able to embrace one another. Not only is it not easy to do, it's impossible to do without the love of Christ.
I
That
literally
is a
saw this
kind of.
once.
Did you?
I saw Nate Saint's son preach with a man who speared his father to death with his arm around him. Translating.
I mean, you're
I was physically
describing
there.
a
It was a
miracle.
pretty big
That's a
moment, I think,
miracle.
actually, in my young life. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Not only is that possible, it happens all the time, and it happens through the love of Christ. And the world, we need that. We need that in
Some
our world. We need that in our nation.
a young man asked me, "How do I handle this?" And I said, "You grieve because it's sad." If you skip grief straight to anger, you're missing something big. Not just in a Christian sense,
Yeah.
probably in a human sense, but
Yeah.
evil's there. It doesn't make sense, but adopting its plays is not the way forward. Using our words in our lives well, there's a playbook for that. Comes from the Lord. Let's do it.
Let's do it. This was not an easy episode, and I can assure you also, listeners, it's not easy for us either as we walk through this. So we ask for patience and grace for us as we are fellow pilgrims, and we find ourselves in interesting times as people have down the ages, and we find ourselves confronting challenges, some old and some new, as people have down the ages. And we need each other, and we need Jesus. And My prayer for you as you're listening is that wherever you find yourself, whether you're angry or sad or depressed or just frustrated, that you will make it a habit to fall at Jesus' feet. Harold Sankball, who's an old
Mm.
Lutheran pastor, he has a wonderful way of putting this. He says, you should be needy with God. You just be needy. You can whine to God. Just pour this all out to him. I mean, when you're reading God's word, I mean, this is a good deal of the Psalms. This is what they are,
Mm.
albeit they're quite eloquent, but that's what they're doing. This is people being needy with God. Be needy with God. Pour this out to him. It's not like he can't handle it. You're not going to shock him. You're not going to horrify him. He's
I
not
have
going
a
to
surprise
recoil and
emotion
say,
for you.
"Oh, can't believe you said that." He can handle it. Even 4-letter words, he can handle it. Don't worry about that. Fall at the feet of Christ and let him hear. He can handle it, and this is the place to unburden your soul. So take that as a word of encouragement,
Speak freely to the
and thank
Lord.
you. Speak freely to the Lord there. Much more felicitous way of putting it. You've been listening to Thinking Out Loud, a podcast where we think out loud about current events and Christian hope.
Thanks for listening to Thinking Out Loud. If you'd like to learn more about what we do, book Nathan or Cameron, or if you'd like to support us financially, whether through a one-time donation or on a monthly basis, you can do so on the donate page at www.toltogether.com. That's toltogether.com. And please consider leaving us a 5-star rating and sharing this content with your friends. It really does help.